to go. Thank you very much. Some last people, co-organizers of mine, partners in crime, wishing me good luck. I think I'm quite positive about this. Welcome everyone. My name is Alexander Ochs. I'm the founder and director of ST Strategies and the chair of the Let's GP Energy Working Group. And I'm the moderator of today's online session. I think a very exciting session that we will have had. Welcome also in the name of Let's Luck, which is hosting today's sessions. I will briefly introduce all partnering organizations to you in a moment. We have more than 100 people who registered for the session today, which shows that we are, I think, dealing with a very interesting and relevant topic. People calling in from all over the world, and wherever you are calling from, we hope that you are, and the people who are around you are safe and you're healthy, and we hope that you remain in good spirits as we're all faced with challenging times and really a terrible pandemic. Our session today is on the potentials and challenges for bioenergy. And we have a very distinguished speaker, an experienced speaker, who I'm going to introduce you in a moment. He will draw on experiences from his work, both in his native country, Brazil, and across Latin America. Before I'm introducing him and he has the word for most of the session, just a brief introduction to the agenda. I will briefly present to you the initiative that's hosting this event and hopefully gain some interest in you beyond today's event to participate and join us in the initiative. Then Professor Luis Horta Nogueira will speak. We have agreed on about 25 minutes for his presentation, and then we should still have ample time to discuss his thoughts, and you will have time to bring forward questions that Professor Horta can then hopefully can answer. And this gets me really to my first housekeeping rule. I'd like to suggest that you post your questions in real time as they come up, as they build in you. And punch them on the right-hand side of your panel into the question and answers panel. This will allow us to order them while Professor Horta is speaking and address those that are maybe most relevant to the general audience. Be assured that we will answer all of your questions. If we cannot answer them as part of the discussion today, we will answer them bilaterally. We will reach out to you after the session and try to answer them then. We alternate our online presentations between Spanish and English. Today's session is in English, but please do feel free to ask your questions in Spanish as well. My Spanish is limited, but I'm lucky to have support from my dear colleague and friend, Ana Maria Majano, who is co-leading this bioenergy community of practice with me, and she will help me to moderate the later part of the session, the question and answers as needed. Please also be aware that today's session is on record. So whatever is being said at this session here today will be posted on Let's Lack website eventually. This is not a Chatham House Rules session, it's a public session. So with this, a few brief introductions of who we are. I'm leading ST Strategies. We are a policy and communications consultancy with a global network of partners. We're working mostly with governments, but also the private sector and civil society. And we really specialize at the intersection of sustainable development, energy, climate, and the environment. So it's this sweet spot that we're sitting in. And I think a lot of the discussion today will be on this intersection of topics between energy generation, energy supply, and sustainable development impacts. You see some of our current work streams on here. It's a lot of it has really to do with integrating different sectors, making our economic sectors climate-proof, and providing providing advice on development that is socially and economically and environmentally sustainable. Here are some of the presentations we've done in this area. I'm not going to present them in detail, but I thought I'd put them up since you're obviously calling in and you have an interest in the topic. So I've been looking a lot in these different reports on mainstreaming climate into the issues. Some of our reports are really focusing on tools that decision makers can use. Others are trying to quantify the sustainable benefits of climate actions with an emphasis on energy in our own reports. For example, the Crunching Numbers report that you see here that we've done for the Mexican government, where we've looked into the sustainable development impacts of 5 different NDCs, one of them actually being a quantification of the sustainable development impacts of wastewater, which can be seen as which is commonly referred to as a bioenergy source. I am co-chairing the Let's Energy Working Group. We are a sectoral group under the Let's Global Partnership, Let's GP, and we're advising the Global Partnership and the regional platforms under the Let's Global Partnership, which are really the center of gravity in the Let's GP. So today's host is Let's LAC, the Latin America Let's Partnership. We're advising them on anything energy, and we're partnering with them on events as the one today. We have now more than 1,500 members from more than 140 different countries engaging with us at different levels of intensity, supporting our work, asking us questions, and I'm hoping that I'm also hearing from you, and we can join forces with you as well. Here are some of our priority thematic areas. Sustainable energy access for all is one of them, relevant for today. Cross-sectoral integration is an issue that we'll touch on today. Long-term energy sector transformation is the third one. You will find more on the Let's GP at letsgp.org. You will find more on Let's LAC at letslac.org. I have this link again on the final slide, so you have time to take it down, and the presentation will be online, so you can click the link from there. As the Energy Working Group, we're supporting different communities of practice. Bioenergy has been set as a priority in Latin America. In Africa, we're working on mini grids. In Asia, on larger renewables grid integration. So if you're interested in these topics, you'll have a chance through the Let's GP website to get involved with us there. We also provide direct country technical assistance. We do many events such as the one today on capacity building. So please join us. I'm hoping you can get involved with us beyond this webinar. Now, the session today is part of an initiative that's called Bioelectricity Community of Practice, and it's a peer-to-peer learning network that we, as the Energy Working Group, are steering together with the Let's Latin America platform. And it sits sort of in this middle sweet spot between direct country deep dives, direct technical assistance we're providing to countries on the one hand side, and the broad dissemination of knowledge products that we also do, products that we put out to the general public. It sits in the sweet spot between them. It's countries, like-minded countries that want to advance on a specific topic that we bring together to work together, to learn from one another, to exchange experiences. And it has been, I think, a quite valuable exercise over the last years. As you can see here, we are in our 4th year already. We did a relaunch this year in 2020. It's a key year for us where we're really bumping up our activities. During the first 3 years, we approached bioenergy, bioelectricity, and biogas from different perspectives and with different connotations and emphasis. The first year was really broadly about advancing bioelectricity. The second one was more from a finance angle, de-risking. Last year, we looked particularly into biogas and the policy and market environments, and you'll find all of the results, or most of the results of the work that we did online. This year, we're really looking into the integration of bioenergy with climate, energy, and sustainable development. So here are activities for 2020. We hoping to do still a face-to-face workshop if COVID-19 allows us towards the end of this year or early next year. We're doing several of these online presentations and discussions. We produce trainings also, and we produce knowledge products. Here are our contacts. I'll put these up again after Professor Horta has spoken, so you can take notes of these. So with no further ado, I'd like to present our speaker today, who will speak about the potential and challenges for bioenergy development broadly on the Latin American continent, with a focus on Brazil. Professor Horta is an international expert and an author of several books and papers. He is currently a researcher at the Universidad Estadual de Campinas, I'm hoping I've pronounced that somewhat correctly, which is a state university in the state of Sao Paulo, and also an associate of the Universidade Federal de Itaúba, which is a federal university in the state of Minas Gerais. He has worked with several United Nations agencies, and he's drawing on these experiences, FAO, UNIDO, UNEP, but also the development banks and IRENA. For 6 years, between 1998 and 2004, he led ANP as director. So what is ANP? It's the Brazilian Agency of Oil, Natural Gas, and Biofuels. He has also led or contributed to the, now I'm looking where this program is, the Renovabio program, which was launched in 2017, and which has been designed by the Brazilian government to achieve its commitments for bioelectricity and bioenergy it made at the COP21 in Paris in 2015. So, Mr. Horta, the floor is yours. Before you get started, quick reminder, please put your questions and answers either in English or in Spanish in the question and answer panel, so that we can answer them in the Q&A after Professor Horta has spoken. Professor Horta, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Alexander, for such kind introduction. It's a pleasure to meet our friends from Latin America, from abroad, to talk a little bit about bioenergy, potential and challenges. No? As you know, this is a very large field, and I chose some relevant points in terms of the barriers, and I think that the Renovabio program deserves attention, and I will introduce you also on this program. Now, let me try to put my presentation. Can you see?
Yes, we can see it. If you put it in presentation mode, then we'll see only your screen.
It is in presentation mode, no?
Okay.
Are you seeing?
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's good. Please go ahead.
Okay. So the contents, the outline of this presentation will start on the concepts. No, it's interesting to make some remarks on the evolution and the current context of bioenergy, and then some information regarding the Brazilian experiences. In fact, all the experience, you have more than 80 years using all the Brazilian gasoline is blended with ethanol. I will focus on more ethanol, but also biodiesel and biogas is important. Then some words about the potential of Latin America and Caribbean, an evaluation that we did in 2 scenarios. Then some comments, as I said, on the Renovabio program, and then some final remarks, and I will be available, interested to hear from you and to go other points. As you know, our first energy resource was biomass. No, it was more than a half million years ago that the first fires was made by man. No, and you are using in the last centuries a lot of biomass. Just a few centuries ago, we started to use coal and oil and natural gas. Basically, biomass was the only source of fuel for millennia. But now, due to diverse reasons as economic, environmental, energy security, we restart to consider bioenergy in a sustainable way. This map shows you the countries that today are blending or introducing blending basically of ethanol, but also with biodiesel. No? We can see that basically all South American countries are green, except some Chile, Venezuela, and Guyana are not using, but Colombia has a strong biodiesel and bioethanol program, and Bolivia also, and Paraguay has a program the same size of Brazil, comparatively speaking, and the same in Argentina. And Central America, Costa Rica is green here, but they are tempting, the ticos are tempting to use, but in fact, it seems that it's not fully green as they could be. Anyway, the International Energy Agency sets in the, you can see here the report in 2018 put sugar cane in the cover, and they said that modern bioenergy leads the growth of all renewables 2023, according to their evaluation. So, it's interesting because when we comment about renewable energy, in many brains occurs that, okay, wind energy, solar energy, but bioenergy represents most of real and effective use of renewable energy in our countries. However, there are still many questions and doubts. One is this dilemma about if you are using biofuel, you are warming the food production. It's a real problem. I think no, there is no lack of food. There are people not able to access food, in fact. Obesity is more serious problem than hunger in most countries. There's no shortage of food. There's lack of access. There are many evaluations on that, and also FAO has shown very clearly that even in the years when the biofuel production, the blue line, climbed, you can see the value in terms of cubic meters of fuel ethanol, the most important biofuel, multiplied by 2, basically, the prices have decreased. So it's not correct to associate prices and of the supply of food with biofuel production. In fact, the agriculture is able, applying the proper technology and with concerns on the agroecological constraints, is absolutely possible to supply food and fuel for our needs up to 2050, according to FAO. So it's a fake fight between food and fuel. And the Brazilian data in many decades confirm that you can use. See, in Brazil, more or less, 1/4 of our land is pastures, okay? And you can see here in the green line the area in pastures in Brazil, about 150 million hectares. And in the red line, you have the cattle herd, the million of herds of cows in Brazil. You can see that we are multiplying by 4 the amount of animal protein as milk, as beef that we are producing, basically in the same area. So it's a very common mistake to associate area with production, because there are ways to intensify the production with proper technology, proper management, and associate increase of biofuel with lack of food. No? To give you an idea in global terms, considering again the FAO, the global agroecological zoning, and very interesting assessment of the land available globally. If you are using just 1.6% of land available for rain-fed agriculture, which is located basically in Latin America and Africa, it's enough to put 11% of energy used in the transport from biofuel. It's a lot of energy. It represents basically the Saudi Arabia production of oil nowadays. So there is more land than we think that we have, okay? And among the opportunities to use this land, we have in our country, in Latin American countries, in wet tropical countries, a large experience in using sugarcane. Sugarcane came from India area, and it's a wonderful plant because it has already sugar in its stalks. And it is one of the most efficient solar energy converter compared with all other. It's a feedstock of choice for bioenergy production. And one interesting aspect is that sugarcane is not an annual crop, an annual as a corn, for instance, that should be planted and harvested every year. Sugarcane is planted once and harvested successively for every year during 5 to 6 years or even more. So it represents an interesting advantage because the cost of planting will be paid by 6 or more harvests. The same planting produce more. So it's a semi-perennial crop. In terms of energy content, 1 ton of sugar is equivalent to 1.2 barrels of oil. So 1 hectare of sugar cane produces per year during eternity, if you manage correctly, 100 barrels of oil. Consider the area that are dedicated to sugarcane in our countries to see that we have potential production, relevant potential production in these parts. No? To use the sugarcane to produce bioenergy, I'm mentioning frequently the ethanol and biofuel, liquid biofuel, but also electricity. We can be produced from the bagasse, the solid byproduct, the solid waste, after removing the sugarcane juice, and the sugarcane straw. In Guatemala, 30% of energy, electrical energy is produced from bagasse. And the same could be used in many countries where the cogeneration can be pushed and promoted. One important aspect that should be highlighted is the energy balance. Due to this high photosynthetic efficiency and also the semi-perennial aspect, every unit of fossil energy put in the agro-industry of sugarcane produces 8 to 10 units of renewable energy because it's very efficient in collecting and converting solar energy. No? And to improve the sustainability, as desirable, as needed. A lot of R&D have been applied. So formerly, vinasse is a residue from ethanol was not used. Today is all vinasse is used in Brazil and the other countries also, where it's available for fertilizing. The biological control of pests is very common also in the modern mills. It is a way to reduce the use of chemical pesticides and so on. The use of sugarcane bagasse, the reduction of use of water. Here you can see the red line showing that in the last decades, how we could reduce the amount of water necessary to clean sugarcane and the process. So we have improved, but there are still interesting frontiers to improve. The sugarcane recovery, the trash, the green harvest, taking the leaves and tops of sugarcane to produce power, the use of energy cane, which represents up to 3 times more sugarcane per area if you are looking for not just sugar, but also a fiber. The second generation using this fiber to produce ethanol, the precision agriculture, which is a way to reduce the amount of fertilizers and agrochemicals in the process. And biogas production from stillage, there are a lot of alternatives to improve. There are large room to keep this process, okay? Some words about the use of ethanol. It's interesting to mention that because in many countries, in some countries, in fact, of Latin America, where they are not using still ethanol, there are some false barriers, some prejudice. Oh, it's not possible. Our cars is not able to use ethanol blends. It's for me a paradox because it's as old as gasoline is. Okay, Henry Ford proposed, and he was an enthusiastic supporter of ethanol. It's not new, and up to the mid of the first decades of last centuries, there was large use of ethanol. There are gas stations, there are advertisements, there are used in many countries of ethanol, pure or in mixtures. So you can ask, well, why didn't biofuels remain in use? Okay, first, it was the low prices of gasoline and the pressure of oil companies to avoid the use. The second, it's a little bit funny. The prohibition, the lei seca, no, the prohibition of use of production of trade of ethanol between 2020 and 1933, but basically stopped the production and use of ethanol as fuel. I recommend this book for you. It's a very interesting book relating to the initiatives in different countries, countries as Costa Rica, as Panama, as Cuba, where ethanol was used regularly in the beginning of last centuries. But it was forbidden. And then the gasoline started as the queen in the transport, okay? But there are news, just to show you an interesting fact, which is the use of ethanol in electricity, electric cars. The most efficient cars use electricity produced in fuel cells. Fuel cells is a way to convert the chemical energy of fuel directly in electricity, using hydrogen or not using hydrogen. It is a prototype, it's still a prototype, that are crossing some roads in Brazil, showing the opportunity to use, you can see here in the picture, that the fuel tank is used to produce hydrogen, and then a motor electric motor. These cars are able to make about, the mileage is about 30 kilometers per liter of ethanol. It's a fantastic performance. No? And in this graph, I show you that produce hydrogen from ethanol is cheaper in a region, depending on the price of electricity, and because the usual way to produce the green hydrogen is to use electricity and make electrolysis of water. But depending on the price of electricity, and in many cases, the price of electricity is higher compared with the price of ethanol to produce hydrogen. Now we have Brazilian streets, this car, it is a Toyota Corolla hybrid electrical vehicle. Okay, so this car, it was already measured, emits less than 20 grams of CO2 per kilometer. There is no other car more efficient and with so low emission. It's the champion in terms of emission. It is using ethanol. So if our aim is to reduce emissions, we have other options beyond just electricity. Now, going to the Brazilian energy metrics, just to show you that biomass is the main renewable source of energy in Brazil. It represents about 1/4 of the total energy supply. Renewable energy and the total energy demand in Brazil is, it was, last figure I have, it was in the amount we has basically and solar energy, hydropower, but bioenergy is the most important share. Are you hearing me?
Professor Horta, we do hear you, but there are some interruptions and your video isn't always clear. So I might suggest that you turn off your camera because that's probably using a lot of bandwidth. Okay. And so we can still see your slide and hear you.
Okay.
Maybe we can try again later in the Q&A. Super, thank you.
Okay. Well, up to here, it's okay, Alexander?
We can hear you very well. I'll jump in again if we can't hear you anymore, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I was introducing you some basic data on the Brazilian energy metrics, showing that we have a 43% share of renewable energy, and in this renewable energy, most part is from bioenergy. Traditional bioenergy is fuel wood used in households for cooking, and modern bioenergy, which is used also in industrial and household heating in more efficient devices and equipment, electricity, which are using rice husks, sugarcane bagasse, other byproducts from agroindustry to produce power, and transport, which is made with ethanol and biodiesel. And okay, reinforcing what I said about the old times of bioenergy and biofuels, it's interesting to note that gasoline blended with ethanol has been a mandatory practice in Brazil about 80 years ago, and it was reinforced after the oil shocks. And currently, we are using E27 in our gasoline and also pure hydrous ethanol. This graph is interesting to show you how it started, as I said, in the 30s, and we reinforced it after the oil shock during the 70s, and now you are with the variable contents, depending on the price of sugar, the conditions of the market, but we have basically 1/4 of our gasoline is ethanol. And biodiesel started recently, compared, and now you are using B12. So all Brazilian gas stations sold only gasoline, which is, I put in green some colors in the letter, which is the E27. There was no pure gasoline. Pure ethanol is 100% ethanol. Most of the Brazilian fleet now today, about 80% of our fleet is flexible fuel, which is the cars, which engine is able to burn or ethanol or both ethanol or gasoline, and biodiesel B12. So it's possible to demonstrate that about 535 million tons of CO2 was avoided, the tons of CO2 was avoided to emit in the last 15 years. I don't know why the same couldn't happen in other countries. Okay, it's not a closed technology. It's open and accessible, and the conditions to produce are basically the same. An important point is that we increased the production of sugar cane per hectare, the yield, and we increase also the production of ethanol per ton of sugar cane. So we have these three curves indicate the history of sugarcane yield, the industrial productivity in liters of ethanol per ton, and the product of both sugarcane and industrial productivity represent the liter of ethanol per hectare. We started with about 3,000 liters per hectare, and now we have more than 60, and in fact, many mills are producing more than 80,000 liters of liters of ethanol per hectare. Now, going towards the Latin America. Latin America represented
Professor Horta, now we cannot hear you anymore. You're not coming through anymore. Professor Horta?
Okay. I'm here.
I'm not sure you can hear me still. Professor Horta?
Okay, let me.
Now you're coming through again.
Okay.
Yes, we hear you again. So
okay.
Probably the last couple of, well, last minute or so wasn't clear anymore. Your time is also up, but I'm very willing to give you an extra 5 minutes, but please don't use more than the next 5 minutes. That gives us 20 minutes for discussion.
Okay, Alexander.
Sorry, 15 if you take another 5 minutes. We can hear you again, yes.
Okay, are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you well. Continue, please.
This graph, I commented that the increase of productivity and the yields, did you hear that? I think so. I hope so. Oh. Alexander?
We cannot hear you anymore. Not sure what we can do about it, if there's anything you can do, or if you want to sign in again. Can we try again? Can you say something?
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
it's now we hear you again. Yeah.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And my presentation.
We do see a presentation, yes.
Okay, and I commented this graph, okay, showing the increase of yields and productivity in the last 4 decades, which represents an important improvement in terms of sustainability, producing more, using less. Okay?
Yes. Continue.
Okay. Okay. Now enter in the bioenergy in Latin Caribbean. In fact, we have a large potential, and we have 360 million hectares of land suitable for rain-fed agriculture, and which represents about 1/3 of global total and more than 3 times the area required for meet future world food needs. As I said before, we have a lot of land globally. With 20% just the Latin America area,
Yeah, no, Professor Horta, can I just
Okay.
suggest that you're going offline and signing back in? That usually fixes the problem because we cannot hear you anymore.
Okay, Alexander.
Yes.
Are you hear me?
Yes,
I
we hear
will
you
move
now.
for another room.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Why are you doing this? And really considering also that we want to leave some time for the discussion. You know, this has been so far a very clear presentation, which provided strong arguments in favor of using sugarcane or energy cane, as Professor Horta put it at some point, for producing ethanol as particularly a fuel for transport. While Mr. Horta moves to another room, I want to mention that, of course, bioenergy is not without its controversies, depending on the feedstock, depending on the technologies, depending on the practices that are applied. So it's important for us as organizers of this session to really note that we are not promoting any specific bioenergy approaches or even a specific role for bioenergy in general. What we do with this initiative is that we are exploring the issue as an important potential contribution to climate change mitigation and adaptation, as well as, you know, a broad host of sustainable development goals, including energy access, economic development, jobs, health, women empowerment. So we hosted an event last year at COP26, and you will find a recording and some material from that session at COP26 in Madrid last year. We focused on the potentials of bioenergy for climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and other sustainable development goals. Last month, we had Clean Energy ESB from Chile presenting on their business, the work their company does on using algae to clean waters and produce both feedstock for food as well as for energy generation. So I just want to make this and make this very clear that it's important for us to share different perspectives on the issue, such as Professor Horta's very valuable contribution today, which I think he can continue to do right now, but not as a means to promote any of those specific views, but really to present to you a broad range of opinions from countries and from companies and from other experts and civil society actors. So with this note, back to you, Mr. Horta, and please try to, we can hear you, please try to wrap up your presentation in the next couple of minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alexander. Sorry for this interruption. And as I said, there's a large potential in terms of land and climate in our region, no? And oh, sorry.
We do see your screen and we hear you. So
yes, but I can move the slides. I can change them.
Try to use the arrows on your keyboard.
Okay.
Press that screen maybe of the presentation, and then we should eventually move.
Okay.
Yeah, there you are.
It's okay. Okay. So we wrote a paper on the potential of sugarcane. It's a relatively recent paper. It's 2018, exactly exploring two scenarios, okay? And on the mature context and the new framework. In the main context, as you can see here, you are using just the molasses from the production of sugar in the sugarcane mills. Molasses is a byproduct that can be used for producing ethanol. And in the new framework scenarios, you have also the use of direct juice, but we are using just 1% of the pasture areas. Okay, here you have the basic parameters that you use it to explore. And in these two pictures, I meant that you can see here for different Latin American countries, the amount of sugarcane, the amount of ethanol in million liters per year that you can produce. And we compared this with the domestic consumption of gasoline. For instance, this bar here showing E1 is Mexico. What this means? That in Mexico, the current sugar production in Mexico produces an amount of molasses that are able to produce this large amount of ethanol. But considering this large fleet that they have there, they produce just 1% this E1 of their demand. Instead, for instance, if you take here Paraguay, just with the sugar, they are able to produce 6%, okay? In the mature context. But if we use just 1%, again, a very conservative value of our pasture area, we can increase the supply of feedstock of sugarcane and so increase the production, okay? So you are able to produce a lot of ethanol. You can see here in Peru, Venezuela, different countries. For instance, even in Mexico, with 1% of the area, you can reach E5, okay? In the paper, you can obtain more details. We can discuss more after this.
Yes.
One important point.
So Professor Hort, I need to jump in because we only have 10 minutes left. We've of course lost some time to the technical difficulties, and I'm sorry for that. I know you had to move to another room because you have two dogs at home, which were barking. So I don't hold it against you. You were coming really through very clearly for most of the session, but you know, you spoke a lot about, you know, the potentials that you do see for biomass, and you know, I'd like to really turn now to some of the questions we have received, and to start summarizing one sort of stream of those questions is why if there are these potentials, why isn't this happening in more countries? Why is there not more a turn away from pure gasoline to more blended fuels that include a percentage at least of biofuels? So turning a little bit away from the potentials that you see, that you have, I think, very clearly outlined, towards the challenges that you see. And I think that was the screen that you had just pulled up. What's necessary is public information, moving some maybe of what you would say the misinformation out of the way. But please, you know, spend a couple of minutes on your thoughts and your experience on what is the challenges. And you said, final comment, in the history of some of Latin America's countries, there was a much stronger role for biofuels there in the past, including, for example, in Costa Rica, that takes a much more critical stand today. So what has happened historically? Was it the the petroleum lobby, the oil lobby? Where do you see the biggest challenges today?
Thanks, Alexander. I think that is the core of our talk, is exactly to characterize, to identify the barriers. So it is these kind of questions have been my main concern in academia in the last 3 decades. I would say that is not a simple question to answer, because it's not so clear. It's a kind of hidden barriers. I would say, to make it simple and more direct, that there are not technical barriers. Okay, we are able to produce in good yields, good productivities, using less energy to produce more energy in sustainable way, to protecting environment, to using natural resources sustainably. So it's not my concern, technical barriers. Of course, that we should consider the agroecological zoning, the potential areas, but the amount of land, the technology to be applied, it's not a question. It's fully no and open to know. The barrier is more in the market barriers, considering that the control of the logistic chain of fuels are in the hands of companies are not interested in to put this in place. All countries where biofuels have been succeed to be introduced, the biofuel blends, it's a kind of rule. Local companies have been an important player. Okay, so Ecopetrol, for instance, in Colombia, played an important role towards the introduction. Instead, Pemex in Mexico always put barriers. It is not interested to push biofuels in Mexico. It's a fact. It's not difficult to say that. Okay, so the market barriers is important. To overcome these barriers, the government willingness, the political decision is very important. So I think that it's necessary to clarify more the advantages, the potentials, to convince some people. And even some environmental institutions, NGOs, put by in some countries, in Central America countries, I know this by talk with them. The people say, no, not biofuels. We are introducing electrical cars. It's a dream. It's a big mistake. Okay, the cost of expanding the electricity supply, the cost of implementing these, the real effect is lower than, the positive effect is lower than if you are using properly produced biofuels that can do right now.
I would say that calculation is very location specific. I would say that Brazil is in a specific situation there, but it's not for me to make my arguments now. I think yours is very well understood. I'm looking at some of the other questions that we're having here, and one concerns the automobile industry in Brazil. Has there been an active role of the automobile industry? Yes. Do you see that from your international experience as being different from the situation in other countries where maybe that automobile sector is pushing against a higher degree of blending?
Good question, Alexander. It's
not from me. I'm reading just from my screen.
Yes, but it's a good question always.
It's a good question.
I would reply that formerly, when the cars was using carburetors, was using ignition systems that was common more than 20 years ago, it was absolutely necessary to make some conversions in the motors to use some blends and higher blends that we are using now. But the current engine technology that we are using in direct injection, electronic ignition systems is absolutely feasible to introduce E10 without any problem. There are many countries that did that. I put this map with the green countries where you can see all these countries are using E10. United States is E10. I'm not talking about E85, okay? So to rephrase that, in the old times, to have some partnership with companies, automakers was important, not now. BMW from Germany, Mercedes-Benz from Germany, Rolls-Royce from England came to Brazil and used E27. Okay, if I prepared one time for a group of studies, a list of automakers. I remember that it started with A from Audi and closed in V from Volvo. All these automakers now allows E20, E10. I can't stop this bark. Sorry.
That's all right.
It's not my dog.
That's all right. But Professor Horta, we are doing a lot of work in Africa as well, and the Let's GP, as well as the regional platforms under the Let's GP, are trying to create as much South-South learning as they can. One question is getting at the question. One question is getting at the idea of what role could Brazil play, say in Africa, so that biofuels, biofuel production in a sustainable manner could be done in Africa. Do you see a role for Brazil? Are you aware of, I'm sure that there's some programs bilaterally or so already that have been set up in the past. But what's your advice there? Maybe you can address the question of what's most to be learned or how to best set up such forum.
Mm-hmm. I am considering to move again for a more silent place. Are you hearing me?
We hear you very well, and the dogs don't come across as clearly as you do, so we can hear you a lot better than the dogs, so don't worry.
Okay.
We only have a few minutes left anyway, so.
It's a proof that you are making this really alive, okay? But I am an enthusiastic of potential bioenergy potential in Africa. I spent a good time in IRENA in Bonn, developing with the IRENA teams and a report on the potential of promoting bioenergy in some countries in Africa. And we are more and more convinced that they have conditions. I believe that Brazil could play a role in terms of horizontal cooperation because it's an open technology. We have interest in to increase the global production of ethanol, to make ethanol a commodity for countries that could be interested to use due to the potential for reducing emissions. Okay, so starting from South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, Malawi, we have some initiatives already in place with good results, but they are some steps behind the Latin America conditions. Okay.
Great.
Even so,
can I ask a quick question just to add to this? Because one of our participants is asking, isn't it too late to invest at this point in these so-called first generation biofuels? Shouldn't we think ahead and rather think about further development and advancement of biofuels?
Okay. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, from the United States, ethanol from sugarcane produced the way that Brazil, Guatemala, Colombia are producing is already an advanced biofuel in terms of carbon emission mitigation. First generation is not bad, okay? It's a good option to start. I think that second generation is the second step after to be implemented to develop the first generation. Countries in South Africa and Africa, Southern Africa, not exactly the country South Africa, but Mozambique and others in this region, should start first from the production of sugar using molasses. It's rational to use this molasses. Then increase in associated mills producing ethanol and sugar, and arbitrating, diverting more for sugar and more for ethanol, depending on the market. It's sound. It's a good option. And according to the evolution, using the bagasse, the straw to produce electricity. I am happy that leads are very focused in the previous years on electricity production. I believe it's sound, okay? And sugarcane also is a good feedstock for producing electricity. No?
Electricity, and then one of our participants was also suggesting to use is as a cooking fuel. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yes, in Africa is absolutely advisable that. I visited, I had a good time visiting energy units in Africa. In Uganda, there is a mill that are producing ethanol, biogas, and sugar with very good performance, and it's approved. I am mentioning Kakira mills, okay, in the border of Lake Victoria in Uganda. It's very interesting that what they are doing there. But again, Alexander, the market for ethanol is still to be developed. They are producing. They are able to put in competitive prices, but there are barriers. There are conditions. We are preparing a new report for IRENA where we are addressing exactly this point, okay? How to prepare a roadmap, a generic roadmap to introduce modern and sustainable bioenergy in these countries where the potential is already there, but we have some cultural barriers. Yeah. One slide that I stopped this is about the it's more strong paradox. I know Guatemala is producing and exporting ethanol, very good quality ethanol for the very exigent markets from Europe, from Japan, as fuel, specified as fuel. But they are not using, so far I know, they are still proving that it's possible to use. They are making some demonstration programs. It's like to make a program to demonstrate for us that corn could be used as food. Corn is okay for food. No, some doctor in Germany said that corn is bad for the health. Don't use corn, please.
Okay. Understood. Your opinion is taken note of. I think we need to come to a final question, and thanks for everyone to bearing with us for a bit longer due to our technical difficulties, and definitely thank you to you, Mr. Horte, Professor Horte, for staying with us. You talk mostly about the transport sector. We turn towards cogeneration as an option, electricity, cooking. Let's talk about the feedstock. You talked mostly about sugarcane and producing ethanol from it. What do you think? One question is specifically on Jatropha. What do you think about other sources, other feedstocks for producing, and maybe you can be specific for producing transport fuels vis-a-vis.
Again, a good question. No? Yeah. Yes. Typically, feedstock represents 3/4 of the final cost. So it's very important to have a good feedstock. Choose carefully. Of course, the sugarcane is a fantastic feedstock, but it's very exigent in terms of land, of water. To produce biomass is important to have a good soil and fertilizer and this kind of thing. So it's still open, the discussion for use of eucalyptus, for instance, okay, and trees and other crops. I am afraid that in some cases we are more enthusiastic than the real data confirm us. The case of jatropha is a good example. Many years ago, I visited in León, in Nicaragua, a project called Thematic. Thematic is the name of jatropha there. And ricino is quite close as Euphorbiaceae. It's very difficult to produce because it's still a curiosity. There, we need to improve agronomic studies to reinforce. There is a classic paper, Alexander, called The Extraordinary Fallacy of Jatropha as Raw Material for Fuel, from the Chinese and Indian Academy of Science, because they are more enthusiasm than sound information. I am not deleting these as an opportunity, but we need to have good data, okay? So the production of biodiesel in Colombia is doing well because they are using palm. Palm is very productive. We're talking about more than 5,000 liters per hectare. Instead, in jatropha, we are producing about 600. And it's a perennial crop. So to have a perennial character, you have resistance against droughts. It's a large and wonderful discussion. Sugarcane is not the only option, but other options should be evaluated with care.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Horta. Not without its controversies, as you know. You were talking a lot about the potentials, the opportunities. You were trying to address some of the concerns that exist. Now you spoke about palm and palm oil, I think, as a part of the equation and the potentials, which
yes,
I know some people are opposed to. No energy source comes without its downsides. We will have more opportunities at future sessions to discuss further. This was a very strong presentation from you, which I really want to thank you for. We hope to keep you further involved with us to continue the discussion. We have heard much more critical voices in the past on this platform. So it's really good for us to exchange these views to make progress jointly in the region of Latin America and across the globe. So thank you so very much for this. Thank you to all of the participants. We had a very outstanding participation in this session today. We could not address all of the questions, and I'm sorry for that, but we're hoping to we will get back to you bilaterally, as I promised at the beginning of the session, addressing your questions, and we hope that we can get Professor Horta involved in answering some of these questions bilaterally. You see our contacts again on here. You know how to contact us, and I please would like you to stay online for just a moment, because as we're closing the session, there's a brief survey which is important for us. We want to hear how you like the session, what we can do better. We're always trying to improve, of course. Before I go, I want to say thank you to Ana Maria Majano, who I didn't need as a co-moderator today. She will moderate again the next session. There was one Spanish question which I caught, and that one I was able, I'm very proud of this, to translate myself. I also want to thank Catherine Bocanegra, the folks at Libellula, which are hosting the Secretariat for the Let's Lack, and of course the Let's Lack platform. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Professor Horta. And with this, I'm closing the session. Please stay in touch for the next one.
May I thank?
Of course.
Okay. So I want to thank for this opportunity. I will send you a PDF of my full presentation, where I introduce some, I think, interesting remarks about RenovaBio and some closing remarks also about bioenergy. And in the last slides, there are some references that could be easily accessed with data on sustainability, on I think, interesting aspects on bioenergy. Thanks a lot for you, Alexander, for Ana Maria, for Christopher, and I am still and always interested to keep in contact with you. Okay.
Thank you. Please stay healthy, Professor Hort and everyone else. Thank you very much.